The distant colony of New Haven hung in the quiet dark of the Epsilon Indi system, like a small, hopeful light. It was not grand or ancient, just a collection of domes, greenhouses, and low buildings built on a rocky but fertile moon, orbiting a calm red dwarf star. Nearly 200,000 people lived there. They were farmers who coaxed wheat and potatoes from alien soil, engineers who kept the air recyclers humming, teachers who taught children under artificial sun lamps, and kids who played tag between solar panels. Life was hard but good. They had built something real, something lasting, far from Earth but still proudly human. No one expected the end to come so fast. It began with static. The long-range comms array, usually steady with updates from Earth and cargo manifest from passing freighters, suddenly filled with white noise. Then came the blip, unidentified, massive, and closing fast. Colony Command tried to raise the object on every frequency. No answer. Alarms sounded across the settlement. People looked up from their work. Some smiled nervously, thinking it might be a surprise supply ship. Others felt a chill they couldn't explain. Then the sky split open. 3 alien vessels, sleek, black, and shaped like jagged teeth, slid out of folded space without warning. They made no sound. They broadcast no message. They simply appeared, and within seconds, beams of violet energy lanced down from their hulls. The main habitat dome took the first hit. The reinforced polymer shell melted like wax. Air screamed out into the vacuum. Fires bloomed where oxygen met plasma. People ran, but there was nowhere to run. The colony's tiny defense grid, a pair of outdated missile turrets and a single drone squadron, activated automatically. They fired. The missiles detonated harmlessly against the alien hulls. The drones were swatted from the sky like insects. Inside the command center, Captain Luis Martinez gripped the edge of his console, his knuckles white. He was a former Earth Navy officer who'd taken early retirement to help build New Haven. Now he watched helplessly as thermal scans showed entire sectors going dark. His voice cracked as he ordered an emergency evacuation to the underground bunkers. But the bunkers were never meant for this. They were for meteor showers or reactor leaks, not an orbital slaughter. Outside, the ground trembled. More beams struck the surface. Storage silos exploded. Power lines snapped and whipped like angry snakes. A school bus full of children returning from a field trip vanished in a flash of light. No one screamed. There was no time. In a small home near the western greenhouse belt, a man named Kyle held his daughter Lily close. She was 6 years old with wide eyes and a stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms. Her mother, Dana, stood by the window watching the sky burn. "Get under the table," she said, her voice calm despite the tremor in her hands. Kyle nodded, pulling Lily beneath the reinforced dining surface just as the roof above them peeled away like paper. The last thing Dana saw was the violet glare filling the horizon. Back in command, Luis sent a final message. He bypassed all protocols, encrypted it with the highest priority, and beamed it toward the nearest relay buoy, the one that pointed home, toward Saul. The message contained video, sensor logs, and a single line of text. They came without warning. They gave us no chance. "Tell Earth," the transmission cut off mid-sentence. A direct hit vaporized the command tower. The alien ships moved with cold efficiency. They did not land. They did not speak. They simply erased. One by one, every structure on New Haven was targeted and destroyed. Every life sign blinked out. Within 3 hours, the colony was gone. Only smoke, molten rock, and silence remained. The aliens, later identified by Earth analysts as the Ketheri, hovered for a few more minutes, scanning the ruins as if confirming their work. Then, as suddenly as they arrived, they folded space again and vanished. No debris was left behind, no wreckage, just a dead moon circling a quiet star. 3 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday in Geneva, the signal reached Earth. It was weak, fragmented, but intact enough. The United Earth Council had been monitoring deep space relays for anomalies. When the New Haven buoy pinged with emergency data, technicians routed it straight to the Strategic Response Division. At first, they thought it was a drill. Then they saw the footage. In a dimly lit briefing room beneath the Alps, Admiral Lisa Grant watched the final moments of New Haven play out on a large screen. She saw Luis's face pale and determined before the screen went black. She heard Dana's voice whispering to her daughter. She saw the violet beams cut through homes like scissors through cloth. Her hands stayed steady, but her eyes burned. Around her, other officers sat in stunned silence. No one spoke for a full minute. President Daniel Carter was notified within the hour. He stood on the balcony of the White House staring at the Washington Monument through the rain. The weight of what he'd just seen pressing down on him like stone. 200,000 lives gone, not in war, not in accident, in extermination. Across the planet, news spread slowly at first, then like wildfire. Families with loved ones on New Haven collapsed in grief. Cities held vigils. Social feeds overflowed with anger, fear, and demands for action. But Earth had no fleet, no weapons capable of reaching another star system. For decades, humanity had chosen peace over power, exploration over empire. Now that choice had cost them everything. Yet in that grief, something else stirred. Not just sorrow, but resolve. In labs buried under Nevada deserts, scientists like Dr. Paul Bennett received urgent calls. In shipyards orbiting Mars, engineers were pulled from civilian projects and handed new orders. In military bases from Sydney to Oslo, volunteers stepped forward without being asked. The Kithari thought they had silenced a minor outpost. They did not know they had awakened something far older, far fiercer, the will of a species that had clawed its way out of caves, survived ice ages and world wars, and now refused to be erased from the stars. But for now, in the ruins of New Haven, there was only silence. The wind blew across shattered glass and twisted metal. A child's shoe lay half buried in ash, and high above, the red dwarf star continued to shine, unaware that its quiet system had just become the spark for a fire that would soon consume a star. Earth had always argued about what lay beyond the stars. Some said humanity should spread gently like seeds on the wind. Others warned that the galaxy was not kind to the unprepared. For years, the peaceful path won. Colonies were built with tools, not weapons. Ships carried scientists, not soldiers. But New Haven changed everything. The silence that followed its destruction was louder than any explosion. In Washington, President Daniel Carter called an emergency session of the Unified Earth Council. Delegates from every nation sat in a circular chamber deep beneath Geneva, their faces lit by soft blue screens. No one shouted. No one debated. They simply agreed never again. Within 24 hours, every major power signed the Seoul Defense Accord. Resources once used for trade or research were redirected. Factories that built solar harvesters began forging hull plating. Universities paused civilian programs to assist military science. The world moved as one. At the heart of this shift was the Helios Project. Buried under miles of Nevada rock, it had begun as a dream, a way to fold space not just for travel but for something more. Dr. Paul Bennett had led the team for years, chasing theories most called impossible. Now, with unlimited funding and a clear mission, his work took on a darker edge. He didn't want to build a weapon, but he knew if Earth didn't protect itself, there would be no future to protect. Paul worked 16-hour days. His lab hummed with energy converters, quantum stabilizers, and prototype drives that glowed faint blue in the dark. Around him, young physicists like Nina Patel and engineers like Carl Ruiz ran simulations, tested materials, and recalibrated equations. They spoke little. Their eyes were tired, but their hands never stopped moving. They had seen the footage from New Haven. They knew what failure meant. Meanwhile, Admiral Lisa Grant stood on the observation deck of Lunar Command, watching Earth rise over the moon's gray horizon. She had spent her career preparing for conflicts that never came. Now she was building a fleet from almost nothing. Old cargo haulers were retrofitted with armor and targeting systems. Mining drones were reprogrammed for combat. And at the center of it all was the Aurora, a sleek, fast vessel unlike any before designed to carry the Helios weapon to its target. Lisa needed pilots who understood both courage and precision. She didn't have to look far. Ryan Cole, a former Mars transport pilot, volunteered the day the call went out. He'd lost friends on New Haven, colleagues who'd helped him fix his ship during a sandstorm years ago. He didn't speak much about it. He just showed up, handed over his civilian license, and said, "Put me where I'm needed." Megan Shaw joined soon after. She had been a deep space comms specialist, fluent in signal analysis and alien frequency patterns. Her brother had taught at New Haven School. She carried his last message in her pocket, a voice note wishing her happy birthday sent hours before the attack. She never played it, but she listened to Kethri intercepts every night, searching for patterns, for weaknesses, for anything that might help. Training began in orbit. Crews practiced emergency drills, weapon locks, and silent running. They learned to move like ghosts through space, leaving no trace. The Aurora became their home. Its corridors echoed with quiet conversations, shared meals, and the low hum of engines being tested again and again. There was no laughter, not yet. But there was trust. That was enough. Back on Earth, cities changed. Posters showed the ruins of New Haven with the words "Remember" beneath. Schools taught children about vigilance. Factories ran day and night. Even artists contributed, paintings, songs, poems, all echoing the same truth. Humanity would not be prey. Paul made a breakthrough in week 6. The null drive could work, not just as a propulsion system, but as a weapon. By destabilizing the quantum field around a star, it could trigger a chain reaction that would collapse the entire system. It wouldn't be an explosion. It would be an unraveling. One moment a star would shine. The next it would fold inward, taking its planets with it. The math was sound. The risk was total. But Paul knew there was no middle ground. The Cathari had shown no mercy. Earth could not afford to show hesitation. Lisa reviewed the plan in her quarters late one night. The star charts glowed softly on her desk. She traced the path from Sol to the Cathari homeworld, a journey that would take months even with the new drive. She thought of Luis Martinez, the last face she'd seen in the New Haven transmission. She thought of Dana and Lily, their names now etched into memorials across Earth. She closed her eyes and whispered, "We're coming." Ryan and Megan trained together in the simulators. They flew mock missions through asteroid fields, dodged phantom enemy ships, and practiced deploying the null drive under fire. They rarely spoke about why they were there. They didn't need to. Their reasons lived in the silence between commands. In the way Megan double-checked Ryan's flight path. In the way Ryan always waited for her signal before engaging thrusters. The world watched, holding its breath. News channels showed clips of ship launches, factory outputs, and council meetings. But the real work happened in shadows, in labs, in orbit, in the quiet resolve of people who had lost something and refused to lose more. Paul stood alone in his lab one evening, staring at the final schematic of the null drive. It looked harmless, a ring of silver coils surrounding a core of dark matter containment. But he knew what it could do. He thought of his daughter, Claire, sleeping safely in their apartment above ground. He wondered if she would one day ask what he had built. He hoped she would understand. Down in Geneva, President Carter signed the final order. Operation Retribution was go. The fleet would launch in 30 days. The Aurora would lead. Earth's message would be clear, not through words but through action. No one celebrated. There was no fanfare, only preparation. Because everyone knew this was not about revenge. It was about survival. And in the cold vastness of space, survival sometimes wore the face of fire. The Cathari still did not know. They moved through their system, building, planning, expanding. They believed humanity was gone, erased like so many others. They did not hear the engines powering up in Earth's orbit. They did not feel the weight of a planet's grief turning into steel. But soon they would. The Aurora slipped out of Earth's orbit like a shadow leaving a flame. No fanfare, no broadcast, no farewell. It simply vanished into the dark, carrying with it the hopes and fears of an entire world. Inside, Ryan Cole sat in the pilot's seat, his hands resting lightly on the controls. The ship hummed around him, alive with quiet energy. Behind him, Megan Shaw monitored the comms array, her eyes scanning for any sign of Cathari patrols. They were alone now. No backup, no rescue. Just one ship, one weapon, and one mission. Months had passed since New Haven fell. Earth had spent every day preparing for this moment. The Aurora was faster than anything humanity had ever built, thanks to the null drive humming in its core. It didn't fly through space, it folded it, leaping across light years and heartbeats. But even with that power, the journey to the Cathari homeworld took time. Time to think. Time to remember. Time to wonder if they were doing the right thing. Ryan didn't speak much. He focused on the stars ahead, on the subtle shifts in gravity that told him they were nearing their target. Megan, usually quiet herself, broke the silence one night. "Do you think they know we're coming?" she asked, her voice low. Ryan shook his head. If they did, they'd be waiting. But they're not. They think we're gone. Megan nodded. She had spent weeks analyzing Cathari signals. Their chatter was routine. Ship rotations, supply logs, construction updates. No alarms, no fear. They were comfortable. That made them vulnerable. As the Aurora neared the edge of Cathari space, Lisa Grant's voice came through on a secure channel from Earth. Her message was short. "You are clear to proceed, Godspeed." Then the line went silent. There would be no more contact. From here on, they were on their own. The Cathari system was nothing like New Haven. It was vast, crowded, and bright. 4 major planets orbited a blue-white star, each wrapped in orbital stations, shipyards, and defense grids. Cities glowed on the night sides. Fleets moved in slow, practiced patterns. This was not a frontier outpost. This was a heart, and Earth was about to stop it from beating. Ryan brought the Aurora to a halt just beyond sensor range, hidden in the shadow of a dead comet. Megan ran final scans. 3 capital ships near the inner belt. Patrol drones every 20 minutes. Main command on Cathar Prime, the 3rd planet. Ryan nodded. He didn't need a map. He had studied this system until he dreamed of it. He knew where to go. They waited for the right moment. A supply convoy was due to pass through the outer rim in 6 hours. The Aurora would slip in behind it, masked by its signal. It was risky, but it was their best chance. As they waited, Megan played a soft tune through the cabin speakers, a lullaby her brother used to sing to his students on New Haven. Ryan didn't say anything. He just listened, his fingers tapping once against the armrest. When the time came, they moved. The Aurora detached from the comet and glided silently toward the convoy. Its hull absorbed radar waves. Its engines emitted no heat signature. To the Cathari sensors, it was just another cargo pod. They passed through checkpoints without a single alert. Megan adjusted their signal in real time, mimicking the convoy's ID code. Her hands were steady, but her heart pounded. Once inside the system, Ryan broke away. He angled the ship toward a blind spot between 2 defense satellites. The star ahead burned fiercely, casting long shadows across the void. Planets turned slowly below. Somewhere down there, the people who had wiped out New Haven lived, worked, slept. Ryan didn't think of them as people. He thought of them as a threat. And threats had to be removed. Megan spotted movement. 2 interceptors launching from Station Theta. They're scanning the area. Ryan didn't flinch. He dipped the Aurora into the gravity well of a small moon, using its mass to mask their heat. The interceptors passed overhead unaware. Megan exhaled. "We're clear." They reached the deployment zone, a quiet pocket of space just above the system's orbital plane. Here, the null drive would have maximum effect. Paul Bennett's calculations had been precise. One activation and the star's quantum balance would collapse. There would be no explosion, no firestorm, just silence. And then nothing. Ryan powered up the drive. Coils glowed blue. The air inside the ship grew heavy, charged with energy. Megan locked the final sequence. Her finger hovered over the trigger. She thought of her brother's voice. Of children who never made it to the bunkers. Of Earth waiting in the dark. "Ready," she said. Ryan gave a single nod. "Do it." Megan pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. The star continued to shine. The planets turned. The Cathari went about their lives. Then, deep in the star's core, something shifted. A ripple passed through space-time, invisible but absolute. The star flickered, not dimmed, flickered as if reality itself stuttered. On Cathar Prime, lights went out. Ships lost power. Alarms blared across the system, but no one understood why. The Cathari scrambled, sending probes, rerouting energy, shouting commands into dead comms. But it was too late. The star began to fold inward. Not collapse, unfold. Its gravity twisted, pulling on itself in ways that defied physics. Planets cracked under the strain. Atmospheres boiled away. Orbital stations tore apart like paper in a storm. There was no sound in space, but if there had been, it would have been a scream. Ryan and Megan watched from the Aurora, their faces lit by the dying light. They saw continents split, oceans vanish, cities dissolve into dust. It took less than 10 minutes. When it was over, the Cathari system was gone. Not destroyed, erased. Only a cold, dark point remained where the star had been. Megan turned away. Ryan kept his eyes forward. Neither spoke. There was nothing to say. The Aurora turned and jumped back into folded space. Behind them, the void swallowed the last traces of a civilization. Ahead, Earth waited. They had done what they came to do. They had answered fire with fire. But as the ship leapt toward home, neither felt like a hero. They felt like witnesses to something too big, too final for words. and in the silence of the cockpit, the weight of what they had done settled in, not as pride, but as burden. They had saved Earth, but they had also become something new, something the galaxy would never forget. The news of the Cathari system's disappearance spread faster than any ship could fly. It did not come through official channels or victory broadcasts. It came in whispers, through broken alien comms, drifting sensor logs, and the sudden silence where a once busy star system used to hum with life. Other civilizations noticed. Some were enemies of the Cathari and felt relief. Others, neutral or unknown, felt fear. And all of them began to ask the same question. What kind of species could unmake a star? On Earth, there was no celebration. The streets were quiet. Flags flew at half-mast, not for mourning the enemy, but for remembering the cost. In every city, people gathered in parks and squares, not to cheer, but to stand in silence. They had demanded justice for New Haven. They had gotten it. But justice, it turned out, left a hollow feeling in the chest. Admiral Lisa Grant stood alone at the new memorial wall in Arlington. It stretched for miles now, etched with the names of everyone lost on New Haven. Men, women, children, even pets listed beside their families. She ran her fingers over the name Luis Martinez. She had never met him, but she knew his voice, his face, his final act of courage. She wished she could tell him it was over. But words felt too small. Back at Lunar Command, reports poured in from deep space observatories. The Cathari system was gone. Not damaged, not disabled, gone, no debris field, no energy echoes, just empty space where a sun and its worlds once were. Scientists called it a quantum collapse. Politicians called it necessary. But ordinary people just called it heavy. Ryan Cole and Megan Shaw returned to Earth as heroes in the eyes of the public, but they refused every interview, every medal ceremony, every parade. They landed the Aurora at a quiet dock in the Pacific Orbital Station and stepped off without fanfare. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Ryan kept his eyes down. Megan walked close beside him, her hands in her pockets, her expression unreadable. They disappeared into the crowd before anyone could stop them. They didn't go home. Not right away. Instead, they took a small shuttle to Nevada and visited Paul Bennett at the Helios facility. The lab was quieter now. Most of the team had been reassigned. Paul sat at his desk staring at a blank screen. He looked older, his hair more gray, his shoulders slumped. When he saw them, he stood slowly. "You did it," he said. "We did what we had to," Ryan replied. Paul nodded. He didn't smile. "I keep thinking about the children," he said softly. "Not just ours. Theirs too. Did they even know what their leaders did? Did they deserve that?" Megan looked away. "I don't know," she said. "But I know our children didn't deserve New Haven." No one argued. There was no right answer. Only choices made in the dark with the best information they had. President Daniel Carter addressed the world that evening. He stood in the White House garden, under a clear sky full of stars. He did not boast. He did not threaten. He simply said, "We do not seek war, but we will not be prey." The message was short, but it echoed across every planet, every colony, every listening ear and known space. Earth was no longer a gentle neighbor. It was a force to be reckoned with. In the weeks that followed, alien ships began appearing at the edges of human space, not to attack, but to observe. Some sent cautious messages. Others just watched. Earth responded with calm readiness. Patrols doubled. Early warning systems were upgraded. Colonies like New Haven were rebuilt, but this time with shield grids, drone sentries, and emergency jump protocols. Humanity had learned its lesson, yet not everyone agreed with what had been done. Peace groups held vigils for the Cathari dead. Philosophers debated the morality of total annihilation. Some called Earth monsters. Others called them saviors. Most just hoped it would never happen again. Lisa Grant oversaw the creation of the Stellar Defense Pact, a new alliance of human colonies bound by mutual protection. Every settlement, no matter how small, now had a direct line to Earth's command. Every ship carried a distress beacon that could summon help within hours. The age of innocence was over. The age of vigilance had begun. Ryan and Megan finally went home. Ryan returned to his small house in Oregon, where the trees were tall and the nights were quiet. He spent his days fixing old engines, walking forest trails, and watching the stars through a telescope he hadn't touched in years. Megan moved back to Chicago near the lake. She took a job teaching signal theory at a university, helping students understand not just how to listen to the stars, but how to hear the silence between them. They stayed in touch but rarely spoke of the mission. When they did, it was in fragments, a shared memory of a star flickering, a moment of doubt before the trigger was pulled, the weight of knowing they had changed the galaxy forever. Paul Bennett resigned from the Helios project. He moved to Colorado with his daughter Claire. He planted a garden. He taught her how to identify constellations. One evening, as they sat on the porch, she asked, "Are the stars safe now?" He looked up at the sky, at the red glow of Epsilon Indi in the distance, the memorial system now guarded by silent drones. "We made sure no one forgets," he said. "Not the cost, not the choice." Far beyond human space, in council chambers and war rooms across the galaxy, species that had once ignored Earth now spoke its name with caution. They did not call it Sol anymore. They called it the Gravedigger, not out of hatred but respect. Fear even, because they understood one thing clearly: humanity would not fall quietly. It would burn whole star systems to protect its own. And so Earth stood watch, not with pride but with sorrow. It had saved itself, but in doing so it had lost something too: its belief that the universe could be kind. Now it knew better, and it would never be naive again. Years passed. The stars did not change, but the way humanity saw them did. The galaxy was no longer a place of wonder alone. It was also a place of warning. Earth had drawn a line, and every ship that left its orbit now carried that truth in its hull. Colonies grew, not with the wide-eyed hope of pioneers, but with the quiet strength of those who knew danger was real. New Haven was rebuilt, not on the same moon, but on a safer world nearby, its name kept as a promise, not a memory. The null drive was never used again. It sat in a vault beneath the lunar surface, guarded by layers of code, steel, and silence. Earth called it the final option. It was not a weapon to be wielded, but a shadow to be remembered. Other species learned of it through rumor and observation. None tested it. None dared. Ryan Cole still lived in Oregon. His hair had grayed at the temples, and his hands bore the scars of old burns and newer repairs. He rarely spoke of the aurora, but sometimes on clear nights he would sit on his porch and watch Epsilon Indi. He never felt pride, only responsibility. He had done what was asked, and he would do it again if needed. But he hoped deep in his bones that it would never be needed again. Megan Shaw taught at the university for 10 years before retiring to a small coastal town in Maine. She bought a house with a view of the sea, and spent her mornings walking the shore, collecting shells and listening to the waves. She never married. She never had children. But she mentored dozens of students, many of whom went on to serve in stellar defense. She taught them to listen, not just to signals, but to silence. The quietest moment, she would say, is often the loudest warning. Admiral Lisa Grant rose to lead the Unified Stellar Command. She was strict but fair, respected not for her rank but for her restraint. Under her watch, Earth never fired the first shot. It built alliances, shared technology with peaceful species, and stood firm against aggression. She carried the names of New Haven in her heart, not as a call for vengeance, but as a compass for justice. Paul Bennett grew old in Colorado. His garden flourished, rows of tomatoes, sunflowers, and herbs that smelled of summer rain. His daughter Claire became an astrophysicist. She worked on early warning systems for colony worlds, designing sensors that could detect alien drives before they folded space. One evening, as they sat under the stars, she asked him if he ever regretted the Helios project. Paul was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I regret that it was needed. But I don't regret that we protected our people." Claire nodded. She understood. Science was not good or evil, it was a tool, and tools were shaped by the hands that held them. Earth itself changed slowly. Cities became greener, quieter, more connected. People valued community more than before. They knew now that survival was not guaranteed, that every sunrise was a gift. Memorials to New Haven stood in every major city, not as monuments to war, but as reminders of what could be lost. Other species began to reach out, not with weapons, but with words. A reptilian race from the Vega sector sent a delegation to Geneva, offering trade and data on Cathari remnants, though none were ever found. A gentle plant-like civilization from the Andromeda fringe shared star maps and offered sanctuary to human explorers. Trust was slow, but it grew. Earth learned to speak softly but carry the memory of fire. No one forgot what had happened. Children learned about New Haven in school, not as a tragedy but as a turning point. They studied the choices made, the costs paid, and the line that was drawn. They were taught that strength was not about destruction, but about the will to protect what mattered. In the deep void between galaxies, stories spread. Some said Earth had wiped out the Cathari in a single night. Others claimed it had turned a star into a tomb. The truth was stranger than myth. It had undone a system so completely that even time seemed to forget it existed. And from that act, a new rule was born across the stars. Do not threaten humanity. Not because they were cruel, but because they would go to the end of existence to keep their own safe. Yet Earth did not become conquerors. It did not seek empire. It simply asked for one thing, the right to exist. And the galaxy, having seen what happened to those who denied that right, granted it without question. On the anniversary of New Haven's fall, a quiet ceremony was held on the rebuilt colony. No speeches, no flags. Just a moment of silence followed by the lighting of 200,000 lanterns, one for each life lost. The light rose into the sky, small but steady like a promise kept. Back on Earth, Ryan watched the broadcast from his porch. Megan lit a candle by the sea. Lisa stood at attention in her office, hand over her heart. Paul held Claire's hand as they looked up at the same stars that had once burned with violet fire. Humanity had paid a terrible price to learn its place in the cosmos. It was not the center of the universe. It was not the strongest. But it was not weak. And it would never again be taken for granted. The stars shone on, indifferent and eternal. But among them, one small blue world carried a new truth, not of fear, but of resolve, not of anger, but of care. They had faced the dark and refused to blink. And in doing so, they had earned their place among the stars, not as victims, not as monsters, but as guardians of their own light.